Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be diving in to the Druhkari Codex tier list. So basically in this video, we're going to be doing a quick review of every single unit in the Codex, and we're also going to be including, for the sake of Reaper's Wager, some Harlequin's units and rating them in the Reaper's Wager detachment, which, by the way, has changed. Their placings in the list will have changed because the power of the Druhkari datasheets has increased immensely. So a lot has changed in the Codex. I know there's some haters out there who say the Codex sucks and, it's a side grade and stuff like that. I'm sorry to say, but the Codex is much stronger than the Index ever was. And I mean, that's saying a lot because Sky Splinter was absolutely brutal when it came out and when they buffed the Druhkari for those, couple of months that it was allowed to be that cheap. But I've now play tested this Codex substantially. I've played every detachment, and I've played most of the units. There are a couple units I haven't played, but because they basically remained the same as in the Index, I didn't find it to be that big of a deal, and I think I can give you guys a good accounting of those particular units when we come across them. All right, so starting at number 1, we have the Ravager. So the Ravager actually went down 10 points with the Munitorum Field Manual points update. And yes, there are a few, channels out there who have access to it, like Art of War and so forth. So I've basically just kind of compiled the point changes for you guys here, and as we discuss the units, I will let you know what has dropped in price and what has increased. And for the most part, things have dropped in price. So a lot of the fears of Dark Eldar players thinking that this was going to be a super expensive, super elite army is not really the case. A lot of the units are still pretty affordable. So the Ravager is coming in at 115, and the Ravager is going to be A tier. The Ravager is really good now, guys. Full rerolls against targets at full strength. So, back in the Index days where you had rerolls for pain tokens, the Ravager just gets that now. And the pain ability is -1 to hit for the enemy unit. The enemy unit is quote-unquote suppressed. And that ability is okay. It's very situational. But the fact that the Ravager is cheap, 115 points, and has way better synergy with a lot of the detachments, like, for example, Cobalite Cartel, means that this thing is an absolutely great choice in a lot of lists. And weirdly enough, the Disintegrator Cannons also got a huge glow up. They got a huge buff. They gained a strength and they gained an AP, which is massive. So, watch out Space Marines, right? They can kill a lot of Space Marines. Not that the army necessarily has trouble killing regular Space Marines, but the Disintegrator Cannon upgrade was nice. So yeah, basically you're usually going to be taking these with Dark Lances. And what I do like about these things is they're quite a bit cheaper than Scourge. And Scourge are still good, but you do have to spend a pain token to get the rerolls to hit. We'll talk about them later. And for the Ravager, you don't, as long as the enemy is at full strength. So Ravager, A tier choice, can shoot across the battlefield pretty easily. It's not super tough, but it's not fragile enough to where like 2 last cannons can reliably kill it. So I'm going to put the Ravager in A tier. I think it's going to be a solid choice. Even if you're just taking one of them in your list, if you're running, something else besides Cobalite Cartel, I think it's a solid option. Okay, next up, and lastly, it has Deep Strike, like all Druhkari vehicles. By the way, pretty much all of them have Deep Strike except for the Flyers, so this can be in reserve if you want it to be. Next up is Reavers, and Reavers got a huge glow up in the Codex, and they are a little bit cheaper for the big squad of Reavers. So the small squad didn't change in cost. That's 70 points, just like in the Codex printed points. But the big squad of 6 is 130, and this is really important because Reavers are excellent in a lot of detachments, especially the Witch detachment. So I'm going to also put these in A tier. I think these are fantastic. I think you're probably going to want at least one unit in most armies, and in some armies, maybe 2 units flying around, 2 units to 3, or 1 big unit to 6. They move 24 inches when they advance. So that's their pain ability. For a single pain token, you can fly 24 inches across the board, and as you're flying across the board, you get to, of course, use their eviscerating flyby ability, which is mortal wounds for an enemy unit they fly over. Cluster caltrops for a big unit will also allow you to re-roll 2 of those results. So oftentimes you're going to get at least 4 mortal wounds on an enemy unit. Doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but when you consider the amount of lone operatives out there that have infiltrate and 4 wounds, like the Calidus Assassin, for example, you know, if your opponent is not careful, they're going to lose their assassin very quickly. So it limits your opponent's ability to mess with you in a lot of different ways. So Reavers are really good. You know, you can take the Heat Lances, which are, you know, good melta weapons. They're basically like dragon fusion guns, but with strength 14 instead of, you know, strength 9. So very powerful weapon and really high AP on them. They're really good. Solid weapon. And solid unit. And also, by the way, this unit's melee capabilities have increased dramatically. So their blade veins are much better. They also have just a better kind of synergy with different detachments. For example, in the Witch detachment, they can either be really tough, they can have extra attacks, they can have, you know, more movement. There's a lot of things that are really good for Reavers. Okay, let's talk about the Taos. Now, the Taos is the first unit I'm going to be a little bit skeptical about and put in B tier. Not because I think the Taos is bad, but because I just don't think it competes anymore with the other options except in one detachment, which of course is the Covenant Coterie. So I think it is very good in the Covenant Coterie, but it's no longer able to reroll hits, which is the big, it's the big, you know, kind of middle finger to the Taos, because its ability to reroll hits was amazing. Now, typically the build on this thing is that you have Haywire Blasters, which by the way are a little bit better. It did get buffed to Ballista Skill 3. That is good. But we have a lot of things that can take out tanks in the army, so that's not really that big of a deal. You can still take the Liquefier Gun and the Taos Gauntlet for that damage 3. Unfortunately, you know, pain tokens, it's not going to be fully empowered all the time. You're not getting the extra AP that you got in the Index. And its pain ability is now it gets to fight on death on a 2-up. Not even automatically, guys, but on a 2-up. Which most of the time it will happen, but if you have a lot of Taos in your army, it's not going to happen all the time. It's not guaranteed. Honestly, a little bit disappointed in the Taos. It didn't decrease in points. You know, it's not cheaper. It's at 80 points still for 1, 160 for 2. It does still have really good synergy, though, in the Reaper's Wager, because it's going to be getting reroll hit rolls of 1. And you can give it advance in charge, and you can give it, you know, good stratagems that are really going to help it out in combat. But again, you're not getting the rerolls. So that kind of sucks. It's also not permanently empowered. Its ability is that when it kills a unit, you get an extra pain token. And from my experience playing, you don't really need that many pain tokens. The pain token economy has totally changed. You're not really in need of tons of pain tokens, except like it may be in turn 1, right? But even then, in turn 1, you usually only need 1 pain token to use a advance roll maybe on some Reavers, or, you know, use some sort of ability on a Witch unit or something like that so they can advance in charge. Something very, you know, kind of just skirmishy, right? And you don't need a ton of extra pain tokens. So the Taos, unfortunately, I'm going to say are B tier, situational. They're good in Covenant Coterie. I don't know if you play them in any other detachment in large numbers, and truthfully, I don't like them that much. I've used them one time, and they were a little disappointing And I know that's not a huge field test or whatever, but typically I get a good or a bad feeling about a unit's poor performance. Like if a unit performs poorly because I make a mistake, that's one thing. But if I put them in a situation where they should excel and then they're just not doing anything, that sucks. And I think hitting on 4s with no rerolls, it's just not working for me. So I think the Taos are going to be kind of sitting the rest of, 10th edition, probably in a corner unless they get a lot cheaper. Okay, next unit up is Witches. Now, Witches went down 10 points, guys. They are now 90 points for 10. And guys, they got a lot better as well. So they're only 10 more points than the Index Witches, but they got so many buffs that I can't begin to describe. And they're top tier. They're S tier, guys. They are one of the best melee units in the Codex, but not because they can do the most damage outright. It's because they are extremely cheap. They can be split up. They are great houses for good characters that we're going to see, like Lilith and the Succubus, which are both great. They both got better, in my opinion. I know some people will think Lilith got a little nerf. We'll talk about her in a second. But both very good, strong characters. And Witches are quite a bit better. You can take 3 gladiatorial weapons in them now, which are essentially power weapons. So, having the rerolls to hit and the, extra AP with a pain token combination, well, it sucks that we lost it, but we gained a lot more out of it because we have just basically better profiles now in general. I also believe that the Hecatari blades got an extra attack. So the datasheet itself, the damage on the datasheet got a lot better. The other thing is their ability. For a pain token, they can advance and charge. But not only advance and charge, they can fall back and charge as well. So, you're probably not going to be falling back, and charging all too much because they are a very fragile unit. But, your opponent might not actually want to flee from them because they still have that desperate escape ability where they force your opponent to take desperate escape tests. So turn 1, you can get out of a raider 6 inches because that's the raider ability, which we'll also discuss. Move, advance, charge something, consolidate, tag as much stuff as possible, try to rely on your 4+ in case, you tag something a little bit strong. But again, you probably won't. You're probably just going to want to tag vehicles and stuff like that. And then your opponent has to fall back from you, right? Against certain factions that aren't good in melee, like Tau, this could be game ending. If you get a squad of Witches into the Tau deployment zone, turns 1 or 2, and you can tag a bunch of units, they're done, right? They basically just have to kiss their ass goodbye, and that's it. They're going to essentially lose the pace of the game, and they're going to just get obliterated. So other armies like Imperial Knights aren't going to care, right? They're just going to move out of combat, or the Knight detachment has a fallback and shoot and charge strat now, so it's not really going to affect that, but it is a good ability still, and the fact that they have more damage now is perfect. And also, being able to split the squad in Venoms for a very cheap cost is also very good. So Witches are an absolute top tier unit. They have a lot of flexibility, and they're going to be seen in almost every list. I guarantee you every single list that is remotely competitive is going to have at least 1 squad of Witches, maybe 2. And in Witch Cult, in the, what is it called? It's called the Spectacle of Spite, yes. The Spectacle of Spite detachment, I believe you'll probably see somewhere like 30 Witches, 40 Witches. And I'm not even... Honestly, guys, I wish I was bluffing with that. I think you're going to see that many Witches in that detachment. They're really good. Okay, next up, we have a new unit, actually. They're the Scourges with the Shard Carbines. Now, I'm going to actually put these in situational, but I do think they're kind of on the higher end of situational. I'll put them ahead of the Kronos here. Now, the reason I'm actually going to swap those as well. I do think Reavers are a little bit better than the Ravager just because they're able to fit in more lists. But back to the Scourges with the shard carbines are a really good utility and buffing unit. So basically, they have the Warwalker ability. When they shoot an enemy unit, everything that shoots at it has +1 AP on their weapons, right? An additional -1 AP essentially. So splinter rifles become AP -1, which is kind of a big deal. Splinter cannons become AP -2. You have, anti-tank weapons like dark lances becoming AP -4, right? So there's a lot of breakpoints there that are really important. So that's awesome. The second ability they have is the Pain Token ability, and this allows them to deep strike 6. This is great for rapid ingressing, right? Rapid ingressing with a 6-inch deep strike is absolutely tops. It means you can position yourself, you can score, primary points if you need to, right? If your opponent, has you in a position where, one objective is totally isolated, they can come down and grab that objective and get you some primary. They're a really good unit. They are 80 points though, and they are a little expensive, but I think you'll see a lot of people taking one unit of these guys in their armies. I don't think they're necessary in every single list, but I do think they're pretty good for the cost, and I would be surprised if you didn't see these guys, at least one of them, in most lists. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Proxy Amber, but you have them in the situational category. Why is that if they're going to be in almost every list? Well, guys, they're actually not that great as far as damage. And I think their damage is so bad that, spending 80 points for them is kind of expensive. I think they're overpriced, basically. They're very fragile. They don't have move, shoot, move. Once they shoot something for that -1 AP, they're gone. And they're gone to like bolters. Basically storm bolters from like a couple of impulsors will kill them. They're really fragile. And they don't do any damage whatsoever. You can take one special weapon, a shredder or a blaster, and the rest of them have shard carbines. The shard carbines are quite pathetic. I had a squad of these guys shoot at Howling Banshees and only kill one Howling Banshee. And I had a shredder in the unit. Now, some of that could be bad rolls, but honestly, my opponent didn't really roll that bad. He had 3-up saves in cover. So, I think I forced 7 saves on him, and he failed 2 and took a wound on the Exarch, and 1 Banshee died, and that was it. So yeah, these guys do not do any damage at all. Actually, weirdly enough, he charged me with all of his attacks, and I think it's so funny. I know he's going to watch this video and laugh at this, but he whiffed all of his attacks with his Banshees, just rolled horrible, and then the Scourges killed his Banshees. So they did more damage in combat, weirdly enough, than they did with shooting. And I just think that's a wild scenario, but it's just not going to happen. So that's why I think they're situational, because I think a lot of players are going to look at a unit like this and say, you know what? I like the utility that they bring, but for 80 points, I could have a squad of Mandrekes. And Mandrekes are much better. Mandrekes offer almost the same utility, if not better. And that's where I kind of think the Scourges are. So they're good. I think they're a solid unit. They're not quite to the level of Taos, where they're only good in one detachment. But I do think that they're a little bit situational depending on what your build is. Okay, next unit is Scourges with heavy weapons. Now, obviously, nothing's changed with these guys, except they did get nerfed by 10 points. So they are 130 once again, but they didn't get changed from the index. Their pain ability is still reroll hits. There's a lot of different synergies now with the different detachments. Like, you can give them, bonuses. You can give them lethal hits against vehicles in Cobalite Cartel. There's a lot of things that they can benefit from now, right? More stratagems, essentially. So that's really good. And that's basically it. Their regular ability is move, shoot, move. So they still just shoot you and then move out of line of sight. So that's awesome. I think they're an auto-include. I think people are probably going to take 2 or 3 units in every list, right? They're a quintessential Dark Eldar unit. Okay. Oh, and what weapons do you take on them? Same thing. Haywire or Dark Lances, nothing changed there. However, I do think the Dark Lances are even more viable now just because you have those synergies with lethal hits and stuff like that. So remember, you are re-rolling your hits. So getting something like lethal hits against all vehicles, if you're running in Cobalite Cartel, or, you know, if you have a unit and you just really need something to go, you can always, you know, use a stratagem to give them lethal hits. So yeah, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. I do still like Haywire though, of course. All right. Next up, we have the Void Raven Bomber. That is up to 245 points. It went up 30 points. Wow. I'm disappointed. I think this is a situational unit for sure. And I'm going to put it right behind the Scourge with Shard Carbines because I do think it's going to show up in less lists than this unit. Now, a couple of things happened with the Void Raven Bomber that I think a lot of people may not be considering right off the bat. It is still decent in Reaper's Wager because Reaper's does allow you to reroll ones to hit. However, it lost full rerolls to hit, which is massive because in Reaper's Wager, the, you know, disintegrator cannons or dark sights, the dark sights that you could take on them, right? Strength 8, AP -4, damage 2. You had 6 attacks per dark sights. You had 12 attacks for the whole thing. And it just murdered infantry. It just murdered basically anything within its 24-inch range. That was, you know, wounds 2, toughness 4, you know, Space Marine mech profile. But unfortunately, you know, it can't really hit outside of that now because if you want to go with sustained hits in Reaper's Wager, that's great, but you can't reroll your hits to get those sustained. So that's not really that good. Oh, you want lethal hits because you want to, you know, trade up into something that a little bit tougher? Well, turns out you can't really do that well either because, you know, you're not really able to get those lethal hits as effectively. You can't fish effectively for those 6s, which you could because the old pain tokens allowed it. Now, it does have a pain ability that strips cover. That's awesome. You can come in, strip cover from something, and then blast it with Scourge and blast it with Ravagers. Really good. But it's 245 points. So the argument there is, wouldn't just an extra couple Ravagers be just as good? I mean, you could have 2 extra Ravagers in your list. If something is out in the open, and you're talking about a Void Raven Bomber that can see over ruins, right? Can see over footprints to shoot an enemy unit, what else is actually going to be able to see that enemy unit? So that's kind of my problem with the pain ability. The first time I saw it, I was like, oh, that's a really awesome ability. And then I saw the Codex cost and I was like, okay, you know, it lost rerolls to hit, but it is cheaper. And then I heard it got increased by 30 points and I was like, oh, okay. It kind of sucks. In my opinion, I think it sucks. I know that it's kind of the only unit in the Dark Eldar Codex that can, you know, see past ruins, but I don't really think Dark Eldar need that. I think Dark Eldar probably just need more stuff on the board, and the Void Raven Bomber takes away from that. So I'm going to put it in situational. I think it's maybe good in certain detachments, but I'm not impressed with it because I think at the end of the day, it's just not going to do enough damage. And there's a lot of armies out there, especially in this meta, guys, who just can blow it out of the sky as soon as it comes in. I don't think there's a lot of good matchups for it unless you're going against a ton of melee armies. Really good against World Eaters, really good against Blood Angels that aren't running any Predator Annihilators or anything like that. Really bad against anything else long range. Like, for example, Eldar. It's horrible against Eldar. They're just going to, you know, hide in a ruin so you can't physically see the unit. They're going to pop out with Dark Reapers and just shoot it off the board. You know, or, you know, if you go too close, if you go within 24, they can just have Fuegan and Fire Dragon Exarch with tokens kill it at 24 inches. It's just not, in my opinion, an effective unit unless it can survive. And there's a lot of things that it's not going to be surviving against. I think an expert can do well with it, but it's, again, I think it is situational. Okay, enough of the Void Raven. Let's talk about Drazar. Drazar went down by 5 points. He's now 85 points, which is fantastic. Drazar was buffed, and guys, Drazar's freaking good, man. Drazar's awesome. I believe it or not, like him better in certain detachments than an Archon. Now, I think in Cobalite Cartel, you still want the Archon with Incubi, but I think as a second squad in a Venom, you probably want Drazar with Incubi for that purpose. Drazar with Incubi is extremely strong. You get that +1 to wound, so maybe you don't take it in Sky Splinter, but I think he's still S tier. I don't think he's as high up as some of the units that we're going to see on S tier, but he is awesome. I think you definitely want to include him with Incubi in most builds, and there's a couple reasons why. And you have to really think about what changed in the Codex to understand why Drazar is all of a sudden, a better choice than he was in the Index. So for one, his weapons, both of them, both profiles, have dev wounds now base. 2, he got majorly buffed in close combat. He has way more attacks. He has 6 attacks on his strike. He has 8 attacks on his sweep profile with the dual claves. He's awesome. He does a lot of damage. He has damage 3 on one of his profiles and damage 2 on the other. He rerolls hit rolls against units that are below starting strength, and when they're below half strength, he rerolls wound rolls as well. So he's a really good finisher of units that are crippled already. So a really tough Death Star that your Cobalite Warriors and other shooting can't fully kill, Drazar and Incubi to the rescue, right? Especially with dev wounds. Again, Incubi, their ability, pain ability, is that they get devastating wounds against infantry. So for a pain token, you can get a bunch of dev wounds against your target. Of course, Drazar's reroll ability only affects himself, but this can also be used with precision, right? So you can give him epic challenge, you can pick out a character in a unit, kill it dead, and then be done with it, and then the Incubi can take out the rest, right? So there are ways that he can just absolutely murder characters still, just like old Drazar. And I think the coolest thing about him is that he's so cheap. He has an Aspect Warrior stat line, or a Phoenix Lord stat line, a Phoenix Lord stat line with Phoenix Lord powerful weapons at 85 points. That is so much cheaper than any of the Eldari Phoenix Lords. And yeah, the Eldari Phoenix Lords buff their units a lot more, but this guy just beats face, right? He's just a world beater. And I think that's, for 85 points, you honestly can't not have it in a list. He's 5 more points than an Archon, and he does so much more consistent damage than an Archon that if you're running it in a small unit, I think it's the way to go. I don't think you want to run Archons in small units. I think Archons are better in bigger units where you can make better advantage of the rerolls to hit. And Drazar is better in smaller units because he's just better by himself. Or with a small squad. All right, next up is Lilith, and she's also auto-include, and I'm going to put her on top. Lilith is really, really powerful. She's actually better. So yes, you don't get to fish for lethal, or not lethals, sustain 2, right? She's exactly the same, by the way, guys. She has all the same stats, except she now just has precision. So she can just pop characters right out of a unit. Now you might be wondering, well, that's not that good, right? She's going to probably kill the whole unit anyway, but this is actually really good because there's a lot of characters in the game that can just spin the tables on you when they're selected to fight. So check this out, right? There's a lot of characters who have abilities in the game that say, X, Y, and Z, give your unit this when you're selected to fight. Or, there's a lot of stratagems that could be possibly free with a captain, a Space Marine captain, or an equivalent kind of character. So you being able to charge into an enemy unit, slaughter the character, probably slaughter a few other models as well, and then all of your other witches, of course, attack and kill a lot. And then your opponent not being able to use reduced cost stratagems or, anything like that to hit you back even harder is really good. It also just makes assassination a guarantee, right? Because you don't have to think anymore. You don't have to worry about, oh, do I have enough CP to use Epic Challenge and also all these other stratagems I want to use? You don't have to account for that. So it's a little bit of, CP efficiency. Yeah, Lilith is still, of course, really good. She has fights first. She gives her unit +1 strength, +1 AP, which is insane if you think about the fact that the gladiatorial weapons are now in witch squads. Witch squads hit much harder at a base level, so giving them +1 strength, their gladiatorial weapons are now strength 5 and AP -3, which is brutal. It's just absolutely brutal. So yeah, Lilith, absolute S tier. You're always going to have her in your list, and it's not even a choice. You almost have to have Lilith in your list if you want to do some major melee damage with her. And she's fights first, so gives you a lot of utility and counterpunch. Okay. Oh, and she's the same cost, by the way. She costs exactly the same as before, 85 points. Let's talk about Lady Malice. So Lady Malice was one of those characters I wasn't quite sure of because she was 115, and even though I thought she was good, I thought, maybe just save points and buy an Archon, because Lady Malice, her abilities are really effective, but you're paying a lot of points for her. Now she's 100 points. So she got 15 points cheaper, and I also think she's A tier or S tier. She's great. I think you also, if you have the points for her, you should include her in the list. She's absolutely amazing. She's great in Cobalite Cartel. She's great in basically any detachment you put her in. You can field her in a couple of different ways. Of course, she can just be kind of sitting with some Incubi in a Venom or something like that. She can be, with Cobalite Warriors in, honestly, almost any detachment, because Cobalite Warriors are really good. And she gives Cobalite Warriors either sustained hits or lethal hits, which is powerful. But I think where she really shines is her profile, because not only does she have a really badass weapon that is really powerful, has dev wounds, high strength, I think it's strength 5, AP -3, dev wounds, damage 3. Really good. It does have hazardous, but hazardous doesn't really matter too much because you have to roll a 1 for it, so it's very rare. And she also gets a 5+ feel no pain, so not only does that help her survive against the hazardous, but she also has a 4-up invul base. So she's pretty durable, guys. She's not quite as durable as Urian, good old Urian, bless his heart, rest in peace. Rest his old wrinkly ass in peace. But she is durable for what she costs, which is just 100 points, and her abilities are quite good. That pain ability I mentioned, sustained hits and lethals, but she also gets Vect. She has a Vectora. So no deep striking stratagems within, a certain range of her, because, she has that Vectora. So somebody wants to come down, pay CP to, 6-inch deep strike next to her. In some cases, they're not going to be able to do it. Now, that's not every case, obviously, but, there are stratagems out there that basically require Lilith, or the Vect Aura to be... Actually, you know what? Scratch that. I'm totally wrong on that. What I'm thinking of is stratagems that pick up a unit, which might not actually affect her, so disregard. But it can prevent a lot of other stuff, right? It can prevent a unit from being able to use a stratagem to charge better out of deep strike. It can be used to negate a really powerful damage stratagem that your opponent wants to use, or, heck, even a command reroll. So I know a lot of people don't even think about this, but if somebody fails a charge against you and it's like a 7-inch charge and they have a command reroll, sorry, it's 2 CP now, So Vectoras are really powerful, basically. Not only does she have that, but she also has an ability to redeploy up to 3 units in her army, which is amazing. Now, I know there's a little bit of a controversy about this because, rules is written, if she's in a transport, she can't use it. I heard the same exact thing with Prince Riel when Prince Riel was a thing in the Eldar Index. I don't know what GW is thinking when they don't properly word these things. I think it's obviously intended that she can use the ability in a transport. Why wouldn't she be able to? But GW, when the actual points come out and Codex FAQ and stuff comes out, hopefully that'll be addressed. If it's not addressed, there's an easy workaround. Just deploy her on the battlefield, right? Or just put her in reserve. Easy, done, right? She doesn't really need a transport, but you could always like have something in the transport first turn, Lady Malice out of it, and then swap it, right? So like a little tactic you can do is you can put a Homunculus and 5 racks in a Venom, and then you could just swap it with Lady Malice and like maybe 5 Incubi, or, Lady Malice and a split squad of Cobalite Warriors, something like that. And then she could just hop in afterward. It's not that big of a deal. But yeah, Lady Malice is really good. And the reason that redeploy is good is because it allows you to redeploy a lot of the units in your army that you really don't want to sacrifice early on, like Mandrekes. If you're playing in Cobalite Cartel, you don't want to sacrifice a big unit of Cob Warriors that are infiltrating. So you can redeploy those infiltrators after you've screened your opponent's infiltrators out. You can redeploy them into better positions. So she's really, really amazing. Also, great new model. I don't know, some of you guys were pretty wild in the comments when I was saying I liked the model and telling me how much you hated the model. I think the model looks great, okay? It looks awesome, and I think the little, veil head is really cool. So whoever doesn't like the veil head, maybe you I don't know, maybe you should be taken alive by the Dark City. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, really cool, really awesome model. Unfortunately, she's not available, so I can't pick her up. Okay, next unit, Mandrekes. Mandrekes are S tier as well. They're great. They're going to be an auto-include. They decreased by 15 points, so they're no longer 90 points, which was absolutely horrific. They're much better overall. You do have to spend a pain token to uppy downy, but you're not going to do it all the time, and you also don't have to bring them in the next turn if you don't want to anymore. So you can keep them in reserve, wait a little bit, and then put them down to strike later on. Their range attack and melee attack got better, so they do more damage now. And they have 18-inch loan up, which makes them perfect at screening your backfield, especially against long-range weaponry. So, if you're going against an army that has like some long-range weapons, but also has the ability to deep strike in your backfield very easily, a couple squads of 5 Mandrakes or a squad of even 10 Mandrakes can really put a stop to that. And at the same time, you have the utility of being able to pick that unit back up once your opponent's, deep striking threats are gone, and just redeploy them anywhere and just wreck face, because they are much better in close combat now as well. They're also really good in Cobalite Cartel because they are considered a Blades for Hire unit. Okay, next up is the Hand of the Archon. Now, honestly, the Hand of the Archon, I'm going to put it in C tier. Now, some people, again, correct me in the comments if you think I'm wrong on this choice, but I've played them a couple times now. They've never really impressed me. I initially thought when I did the review of the Codex that the icon gave the whole unit +1 OC. So I was like, oh, heck yes. You pick an objective, right? That's their ability, is you pick an objective on the board in no man's land. Or actually, I think it could be any objective, but it's probably going to be one in no man's land. And the unit gets OC3 and a 5+ invul while you're on the objective, which sounds good on paper, but when you put it into practice, a lot of the times the unit just dies to shooting, because a 5+ invul, believe it or not, is not that good. It's not that good. It doesn't really give them a good chance of surviving. The OC3 is nice, but if the unit's dead, it doesn't matter, obviously. And I think the other thing about this unit is its ability kind of sucks. It's lethal hits and precision, which we already have on a bunch of stuff. Succubuses have it. Lilith has it. In Cobalite Cartel, there's a contract that gives you precision. You know, I mean, I think even Homunculus get precisions. So there's a lot of precision in the army already. So that's one thing. I mean, you could obviously use Epic Challenge on anybody, right? So precision isn't something that's necessarily needed. You also get lethal hits. Lethal hits is okay, but here's the sad part about that. Yes, you get lethal hits, but you know what doesn't benefit from precision in the squad? Dark Lances and Blasters. Dark Lances and Blasters do not get the bonus precision ability. Again, that really sucks. And also, you don't get to take all the special weapons and heavy weapons. You can only take one special weapon, which is a Shredder or a Blaster, and one heavy weapon, which is a Dark Lance or a Splinter Cannon. Additionally, the rest of the unit is kind of a hodgepodge of, you know, splinter rifles and, you know, maybe a shard carbine thrown in there. And then you have maybe something like a, you know, I don't know, a pain sculptor or I can't remember what it's called, but it's a razor flail. That's what it's called. Or a razor flail. And it's a unit that wants to be a ranged unit and a melee unit together, like a hybrid unit. It's kind of like the Corsair Voids Guard, except honestly, it's a little bit worse. You know, it's not as good as the Voids Guard, but it is cheaper. But the other problem is you can't take this in a unit of 5. So I think this unit needs buffs. I think it needs to be reduced in cost, or it needs to be able to break up into units of 5. So you could just take 5 of them. I think 5 of them with the abilities that they have is reasonable. I think that's really good. If you could take them in units of 5, you could see this more often, and it would probably be a more situational unit. But as of now, I think it's kind of crap. Doesn't really do its job, which is holding objectives. Doesn't really do a lot of damage. And honestly, for cheaper points, you could have a Cobalite Warrior squad that does more damage more consistently and has sticky objectives. Okay. Next up is the Raider. The Raider is a strong choice, A tier. It is a great transport. I don't think it's required for every single detachment, which is why it's not an S tier, but it is strong. It's 85 points, which is a little pricey, but it has abilities that grant various battle line units great buffs. Racks allow it to have a bunch of attacks, right? +1 attack per rack in the transport. Witches get to disembark 6. Cobalite Warriors get to sticky an objective from the Raider. So, by the way, Cobalite Warriors lost the ability to sticky an objective with a Venom, but they can still do it with the Raider. So, Raiders are good. The Raider also got some bonus attacks. Instead of just 3 attacks, it now gets 3 plus D3, which doesn't seem like a big deal. But, it means that less units can tie it up in combat, right? Like, no longer will a single or, 1 or 2 Eldar Aspect Warriors be able to tie this thing up in close combat. So that is a benefit. Okay. Raider's good. A tier, obviously. I think it's actually, I'll put it ahead of the Ravager here. We are going to talk about racks next. Racks, I think, are situational. But I'm going to put it ahead of the Taos and the Void Raven Bomber. Actually, I'm going to put them on top. I think they're the best of the situational units, but I still think they're situational. Reason being, they look tough on paper, but they're kind of just tough for Dark Eldar. They're not really that tough. A lot of people can kill Space Marines, right? A lot of people have Space Marine killing technology in their armies. Racks are just worse Space Marines. They're just Space Marines with a 5-up armor save. That's it. They're not that tough. They do cause battle shock when they shoot and fight, which is situationally good. But mostly you're going to see these guys being used as a unit that's a bodyguard for a Homunculus. Their pain ability allows them to get up to 4 attacks, 3 attacks normally, but up to 4 attacks with their twin-linked anti-infantry 4+ weapons, which is pretty good. They will get hazardous if they choose the 4 attacks option. So they can deal a lot of damage to like infantry units that don't really have a lot of armor. But, other than that, they're a little lackluster. I think they're really good in the Covenant Coterie, and I think they're okay in Real Space Raid because you can have -1 damage on them. So there's a couple of detachments where they can be good, but in general, I don't think they're super good. I think you take them with a Homunculus, to sit on an objective. Maybe you take 5 of them. Maybe you take the full squad of 10, and you just kind of sit them on an objective that's semi-protected, maybe your expansion, because they do have OC2 apiece, and they did go down in cost from the printed Codex price. So they are 65 for 5. I think it's 110. Yeah, it's going to be 105 actually, 105 for 8, which I don't know why they're in squads of 8 for some reason. If anybody knows if there's a lore reason for that, let me know. But as far as I'm concerned, it's weird that they're in squads of 8 and that there's even an option for a squad of 8. But we also have a squad of 10 at 130, and that's not terrible. 130 for 10 of them, not a bad cost with a Homunculus for a total of 200 points. They can just sit on an objective that's behind a wall and pretty much just absorb hits the entire game. If somebody wants to use indirect fire on them, it's not going to be that effective. If you want to hold your home with something cheap that you've already stickied, a Homunculus with 5 racks can do it pretty easily. But I think they are going to be situational at best. All right. Next up, we have the Succubus. The Succubus is really good, and I'm going to put her in A tier. I'm going to put her right behind the Reavers, only because I think that in some detachments, the Succubus can be a little lackluster. Honestly. I think, like, for example, in Real Space Raid, where you're already gaining command points, one of her abilities is that she gains a command point if she kills, or you gain a command point, if she kills an enemy character. Or your witch unit kills an enemy character. That's really good. That's a really good ability. It's not going to come up that often, but when it does happen, it's going to give you that little bit of CP boost, right? In combination with things like Archons and discarding secondaries, you're going to have a pretty good command point economy, at least a much better one than you had in the index days. She's only 50 points as well, so she's really cheap. She gives her squad of witches sustained hits 1. There's a lot of enhancements that make her much better, like Morgana's Curse in the Spiteful Spectacle of Spite, I should say. And there's some good ones elsewhere, like in Real Space Raid, I think you can get +1 attack, -1 AP. And then if she is empowered with a pain token, she gets +2 attacks and +2 AP or something along those lines. That's really good. And she got buffed on her datasheet, so she has more attacks. I think she has like 6 or 7 attacks now, which is awesome. And lastly, she allows you to reroll charge rolls and advance rolls when you empower the unit. So witches are empowered in the charge phase. That's what allows them to, do the fallback and charge and advance and charge, right? Now, what that means is that now you can re-roll that charge roll, which is really strong. So being able to advance and charge and then re-roll the charge roll is pretty peak. And it's very cheap. She's 50 points. Again, she's like maybe 65 or 70 with a really good enhancement on her. And she just slaughters basic characters. Absolutely slaughters them. She has anti-infantry. She's really good. So she's really awesome for the cost. That's why I put her in A tier, even though, she's kind of more on the cheap side. Okay, next up is the Venom. The Venom is going to be probably at least one of them in every list. It's a really strong unit. It's going to go ahead and go in S tier. For now, I'm going to put it on the lower end of S tier, but it is a really, really powerful unit. We're going to replace Mandrekes. I'll put it ahead of the Mandrekes here. And the reason I think it's so good, obviously, is, it's something that allows you to get multiple activations in with your combat units. You have a lot of very powerful 5-man or 5-woman packages in this army. You have Lilith and 5 witches. You could have a Succubus and 5 witches. You could have Drazar and 5 Incubi, right? You could have Lady Malice and 5 Incubi. You have a lot of abilities here, or a lot of combinations, that really lend well to the Venom. Just like you had in the Index, but actually now I think it's a little bit better because the units themselves are a little bit more valuable. The Venom is still very cheap, 70 points. It's the same cost as in the Index. I don't see that changing. It comes with 2 splinter cannons, which are just okay, whatever, right? But it comes with a new pain ability, which allows you to advance and disembark. Now, this doesn't help you charge the unit afterward, but it can help you get to a good position on the board, drop out a little squad of baby Cobalites, right, with all the special weapons, shoot with your Cobalites, and then using the Venom's ability, you can hop back in the transport. I think that's really cool. Venoms move 14 inches and they advance D6, so it gives you a little bit of extra leeway for a pain token to move your unit up to where it needs to be, so you can shoot it and then get back in the transport. Again, it's situational, but it could be really cool, and I think in some detachments this could be really awesome when you blend it together with buffs that the Cobalite Warrior unit can have. So in Cobalite, Cobalite Cartel, you could give your Cobalites +1 to hit, or it's +1 ballistic skill, really. +1 ballistic skill and -1 AP on their guns. So their guns are like supercharged. The Dark Lance is hitting on 3s. The Splinter Cannon's hitting on 3s. For a pain token, you're re-rolling your wounds. It could be really good. So I love the Venom. It's a really good transport, really cheap, and allows you to break up your units so that you have more threats on the board. Okay, Homunculus is next. Homunculus is situational. Again, I think it's a little better than Rax, but you're usually going to field them together. The reason why I think maybe a solo Homunculus will fit into some lists is because you could potentially get a pain token every turn, but it's on a 4-up. I think a lot of newer players are going to put one of these in their lists and be like, oh, I have trouble with pain tokens. That means I'll put a Homunculus in the list. And they're just not going to get much out of the Homunculus. I do think you do want to take it with a squad of Rax just because then it serves multiple purposes. And you never want to be in a position where a unit is just solely there for a roll of a 4+ every turn. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. So including a unit in your army that's 70 points, that's kind of expensive, just for a 4-up chance of getting a pain token, which by the way, the pain token economy isn't really that bad. A lot of people are making it out to be worse than it is. It is pretty reliable throughout the game that you're going to get enough pain tokens to do what you want. So yeah, not a huge fan of the Homunculus. Again, I think he's much better in Covenant Coterie, of course, in the Covenant detachment. He's much better. But anywhere else, I just think he's situational at best. You might have him in a list, you might not. Okay, next up, one of my favorite Coven models of all time. And honestly, God, when 5th edition came out and this little guy came out, it was love at first sight. I love the Kronos. I always have. I always have thought he was super cute little tentacle guy, and he remains so. I'm going to actually put him in A tier. I'm going to put him above the Raider here, even though he probably should be a little lower on the A tier list. Yeah, let's just be realistic. I have to check my bias a little bit here. I think the Kronos is solid in pretty much any detachment. Even so. And I'm going to explain why I think the Kronos is so good. So, you have a couple of options with the Kronos now. In the Index, there was only one option. You take one Kronos for 50 points, and it just regenerates pain tokens for you. Now, it basically does the same thing, but on a 5-up. If you choose not to take the Spirit Vortex, you get +1 to that roll. So you get a 4-up, but you lose a weapon. However, the Kronos did gain a couple things. It gained way better melee attacks. So now it has much better melee attacks. It has anti-infantry 2+ on its melee, which is insane. Now, the reason why it's insane is because this thing can regenerate wounds for a pain token. So if it loses wounds from something, it can regenerate them. This makes it a really good candidate for a backfield presence. Kind of hang around your Scourges, right? You still want it to hang around your Scourges. But if your opponent goes after it with something, let's say they deep strike something in the backfield, or in the late game, they charge it with something that's like, not super significant, that can kill it in one shot, the Kronos can strike back reasonably hard and then can heal off of it. So whatever damage your opponent does to it, it's going to heal back. Let's say you get charged with like a squad of 3 or 4, like a damaged squad of intercessors, jump intercessors. They're just not going to be able to kill it, right? Even with a power fist in the unit, your opponent is just going to not be able to take it down before the end of the game. And chances are, if it happens on turn 4 and you get 4 rounds of combat in, the Kronos just sits there victorious, right? That wasn't the case before. That just simply wasn't the case. It was probably actually maybe not 100% going to die, but if you had bad rolls, it was going to die, right? Over 4 rounds of combat, most definitely. Now, it's just not going to do that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you can ramp this up to the next level by taking 2 of them in the unit, giving one of them the Spirit Vortex for extra range damage, and giving the other one no Spirit Vortex, so you get that +1 for pain tokens. You can spread them out a little bit so that your Scourges can move a little bit farther apart to blast down firing lanes, and you can still get the benefit of the 4+, but you can get another ranged weapon in that unit. And here's the best part about using 2 Kronos. I know it's 110 points, so it's a little tiny bit more, it's a little bit expensive, but God, Kronos are so cheap, it's almost worth it. Nothing is going to be able to really fight them as far as infantry goes and be able to kill them without it being something that's designed to kill big stuff. So unless you're going up against something that has like strength 7, lance, AP -3, damage 3, all those, big, hard hitting Space Marine units, if your opponent's not throwing that at them, then quite simply, the Kronos are going to survive, and they're going to regenerate all their wounds. And the greatest part about it is if your opponent does manage to kill 1 Kronos, the other Kronos can then attack and resurrect. Can resurrect the Kronos to 3 wounds. Like, it's really good. 2 Kronos are actually not like a meme or anything like that. They can actually be really good. So I really love the Kronos. You can use them in multiple ways. You can use them as that buff. Still, they are better. They are much better as well as they were in the index. Or you could just use them as a unit that can be both a buff and an actual fighting unit, which I really like. So I really love the Kronos. I think they're great. All right, let's talk about the Razorwing Jet Fighter. Razorwing Jet Fighter. Man, I like the idea of it, but it's a flyer, right? So it's 170, not bad. Gets +1 to hit against ground targets. Not bad. Its ability is -2 to movement and charge rolls. Not terrible, but not really great either, honestly. So, those effects have kind of dropped off from being that good in a lot of detachments. And I think Dark Eldar are one of them, just because Dark Eldar are so aggressive. We're not a defensive faction. We're not like certain Eldar builds that want to like keep our opponents back, So Dark Eldar is going to be in your face 24/7. It's going to want to be close to you. If you do get charged, you're probably dead, and your opponent's going to be close enough to where a -2 to charge rolls and -2 to movement isn't going to be a big deal in most cases. It's also 170 points. It also can't start applying that minus, and I think this is the biggest thing. It can't start applying the -2 movement, -2 charges until it comes in on the board on turn 2. This limits your ability to actively screw over your opponent's charge rolls and movement plans, because your opponent is already going to have a turn to get into a position where it won't matter half of the time. Because obviously, if you go second, your opponent's going to get 2 movement phases ahead of you, and at that point, the Razorwing is just not that good. So I'm going to say that it is in the needs buffs category. needs to be cheaper. Its weapons aren't that good for the points you pay. Very, very fragile. It's more fragile than the Void Raven Bomber, and it doesn't do nearly as much damage. Honestly, in most cases, a waste of points. All right, next up is Incubi. We're going to put these right in A tier. They're going to be at the top of A tier, guys. And they are a very strong unit. And the only reason they're not higher is because I personally believe that there are more cost-effective options in certain detachments. But other than that, Incubi are really, really not needed in certain builds. So in certain detachments, you're not going to use Incubi at all, right? They're not needed in every list, but they are still good. And I think there are several detachments that really love using them. And I think, above all, Cobalite Cartel just absolutely wants at least one big unit of 10 in the list. So they are very strong. They're very strong in combination with either Archons or Drazar. With an Archon, in certain combinations, rerolling hits, you can just absolutely kill a knight. I just did a video on it where you could have 10 Incubi with an Archon, charge into a knight, and just kill it in one round of fighting for a lot less points. I know that it was technically possible in the index to do this, but it's much easier now to get it done. And there's also some caveats where you get extra utility as well from the detachment. So I think these guys are really, really good. Also, they're improved over the index version. So they're the same cost as the index, but they're just better. They have strength 5 on their weapons. The Clavix has an extra attack on his weapon, and he still has the dual blade ability if he wants to go after damage 1 stuff. He still has that dual blade. They have the Tormentor helms, which cause battle shock test, but also if your opponent is battle shocked, you're at +1 to hit, which is amazing. And their pain ability is dev wounds against infantry. So these guys are just slaughtering Space Marines left and right. Having strength 5 is an incredible breakpoint, especially with Drazar, because he's giving +1 to wound. So now you're wounding stuff on 2s, which is incredible. Really good. Incubi are still a very, very powerful unit. And they have to be A tier because Drazar makes them so good. 5 Incubi with Drazar is just like chef's kiss. Highly recommend that in most detachments. The only detachments I would not take Incubi in are probably the the Spectacle of Spite, the Witch detachment. And I wouldn't take them in the Coven detachment, obviously. But I would take them in most other detachments. I think they're really, really good. Okay. Next up, we have Cobalite Warriors. I mean, honestly, guys, we couldn't put them anywhere else. Really strong unit. Sticky objectives. Yes, they don't get to reroll all hits anymore, but they get to reroll wound rolls of 1 with a pain token or full rerolls against an enemy unit on an objective. That is very strong. Also, tons of ways. I mean, they still have sticky objectives, obviously, but tons of synergies with stuff. Cobalite Cartel gives them sustained hits or lethal hits against, vehicles or monsters or infantry or mounted units, depending on what your contract is. These guys are just good at doing everything, right? They have weapons that are good against infantry. They have weapons that are good against vehicles and monsters. They're going to benefit from whatever it is regardless. Sticky objectives is obviously very strong, but also the ability to split them is really good as well because you can have, your 4 special weapons and a little Venom running around. That's always good. And they're just a solid unit. They are 115. They didn't get reduced in price for some reason. Again, I don't know why that is, but I will say this. If you put an Archon with them, they can do a lot of damage in Cobalite Cartel. So I have a couple of units in Cobalite Cartel with Archons. They just absolutely obliterated infantry units, right? They're really strong at doing that. So they are a very good unit still. I think obviously a staple in most Dark Eldar lists. Okay, let's talk about the Archon. So the Archon is also going to be, in my honest opinion, an S tier unit, but I'm going to put him a little bit ahead of some of these things. I'm going to put him right after Lady Malice. The Archon is great. So the Archon is going to be the character that gives you CP reduction for your stratagems. So having an Archon, use a strat on their unit for free is really powerful because Dark Eldar struggle with CP generation, right? They don't have an Eldrad. They can't just gain a CP every turn, except in Real Space Raid. That's the only detachment that allows that. And even then, guess what model you're probably going to put it on? An Archon. That's just how it is. So, what does an Archon do besides that? Well, the Archon has reroll hits for the pain ability. So if you use a pain token on him, his unit rerolls hits rolls. Really good. He also has a little bit of a unique ability. It allows him to unbattle shock something. So if a target is battle shocked, a friendly unit within 12, at the start of any phase, he can just say, you're no longer battle shocked, which is really good when you consider units that need to complete actions. So if you have like a squad of 2 Mandrekes left, they got shot at, almost died in turn 1, there were only 2 left on them, they use their battle shock, they fail their battle shock test, and you're like, oh man, I can't do any actions with them, I guess. Wrong. You have an Archon within 12. Archon can just say, you're not battle shocked anymore, and that's it. Really good ability. Situational, but good. And that's it. That's the Archon. Now, he's really good in combat as well. He has the Shadow Field, which is 2+ invulnerable save. Really good for like keeping him alive in weird situations, although sometimes you do get unlucky with it. And that's how it's kind of balanced, is that you roll a 1, you don't get the invul anymore. And his regular save is just a 4+. His melee weapon, the Husk Blade, is going to be what you usually take, is really strong as well. Dev wounds, strength 3 base, AP -2, but you gain an attack and you gain a strength every single time your Husk Blade kills a model. So up to a maximum of 2, right? So actually, I kind of said that a little bit wrong. So basically, you get +1 strength and +1 attack for having a soul trap, right? That's the item I'm talking about, the soul trap. Then, additionally, if you kill an enemy model, you get an additional attack and strength. So you'll be hitting at strength 5 with 6 attacks and AP -2 dev wounds. Pretty good. Pretty good. Huskblade is really powerful. The Agonizer is really good with a squad of Incubi because your Archon will benefit from the dev wounds. So you'll be able to do dev wounds with anti-infantry with the Archon. Of course, he's also re-rolling hits, which is very strong. And you can take a power weapon if you want a little bit of mix of both, but I don't recommend it. I think the power weapon is the worst of the options. It is damage 2, but you might as well just go with the Huskblade for the dev wound opportunity. So Archon's very powerful. It's going to be, at least one Archon is probably going to be a staple in every single list. And it's your way of gaining more CP. Pseudo gaining CP. All right. Now, we have saved the best Dark Eldar unit for last, the Helions. Guys, these guys are super OP. I think I just have to put them in S tier. I would put them ahead of Lilith, but I know Lilith is like one of the best units in the entire... She's like one of the best characters in the entire game for her points, let alone the Druhkari Codex. So I'm going to put Helions in second, and Helions are incredible. They have gotten a major glow up. First of all, guys, they got reduced by 10 points. They are no longer 95 points. They are 85 points. They're very cheap. They get a reactive move, just like Rangers do. When you move within 9 inches, they can move D6. So that can help you get out of a sticky situation, or it can help you move towards your opponent. Now, you might be wondering, why would you want to move towards your opponent? Well, in the Spectacle of Spite, there is a stratagem called a Challenge Met, which allows a Witch Cult unit. By the way, these are Witch Cult, so they benefit from all the combat drugs and all that kind of stuff in that detachment. This stratagem allows you to charge an enemy unit at the end of the movement phase. So they move up with their ability, and then at the end of the movement phase, they charge. And they can just wreck that unit. It really prevents a lot of your opponent's shenanigans, and it stops your opponent from being able to just shoot you to death at close range. So if your opponent wants to go up and drop a squad of, Fire Warriors, I can't remember exactly what they're called, but the guys with like 10-inch range, breachers, that's what they're called. If your opponent is Tau and wants to drop a squad of breachers right next to you, challenge met, charge them, kill them all, right? Easy. Your Eldari opponent wants to, jump warp spiders next to you. Sorry, I'm charging you, right? Really, really good stratagem. Helions being able to move the D6 and then do it is really, really good because it guarantees that you're going to make that charge. Also, the unit itself has a lot of attacks. So their Hellglaives have 3 attacks base, which is average, I think, for a combat unit. Strength 4, Strength 4, AP -1 damage to Lance. It has the Lance ability, which is +1 to wound. Now, that's good enough already, but their Pain Token ability gives them +1 strength and +1 attack. So now they're swinging at 4 attacks, strength 5 with the Lance, and this just starts to devastate Marine squads. Marine squads are now being wounded on 2s, which is insane. So even if you countercharge, you're still getting that Lance bonus, and you can still pay the Pain Token for those extra attacks and strength. Really strong. Yeah, this unit is beast mode. Now, obviously, the unit is good in units of 5, really strong in units of 5. Helions are also good in units of 10 in Spectacle of Spite. And I highly suspect that they are going to be at the price point at 85 points, one of the units that you will see in every single Druhkari list, in every single detachment. I don't think there's a single detachment in the book that would not benefit from Helions. And maybe you don't see them in Sky Splinter, because in Sky Splinter, everything's in a transport, right? So they have no support in that detachment, but they're just such a good unit at a base level. 85 points for a unit that can kill Marines and wound them on 2s, and they're just getting a 4+ save. They're hitting on 3s. They're just amazing, right? So I think they're really good in just so many detachments that you really can't go wrong with a unit like this. And the other thing I like about them, they don't need any character support, Incubi, the reason why Incubi aren't in S tier, by the way, is because they're kind of expensive at 85 points, but they also need a character, right? They need a character to kind of do what, or at least a character or a transport, right? They need one or the other or both to be able to do the things that they need to do to be powerful. Helions do not need shit. They just need to be out there, right? They just need to be played well. That's it. And that's basically where I'm at with the Dark Eldar units. Now, you'll notice there's a lot of top tier units in here, and there's a reason for this. It's because this codex is very strong. There's a lot of units that are very good that you're going to see in a lot of lists, and because the Dark Eldar units are so cheap in comparison with other armies, even when compared to Eldari, right? Warp Spiders are 95 points, and Helions are 85 points. Helions are obviously, same model count and everything, but more wounds. On average, Dark Eldar units are just going to be cheaper than their Eldar equivalents, even in the elf realm, right? So your Dark Eldar armies are going to be typically much bigger. And this means more units are going to be auto-include, right? You're going to have more unit selection, and you can fit a lot of this stuff in a list. You can very easily fit all of the things in S tier in a single list and have a very strong core of units to destroy your opponent with. And then in your A tier is, you have really strong units that complement the S tier, right? Incubi complement Drazar, for example. The Kronos complements Scourges. The Raider complements witches and is able to transport, Cobalite Warriors. You have Reavers, which are able to, move, block, and set up the game for your S tier units to hit hard afterward. Stuff like that. Your B tier units, kind of not really that great. Situational units that are only going to be, kind of used seldomly. Then you have your C tier units, which suck, quite frankly, and probably won't ever be played. Really a big shame about the Hand of the Archon. I love the Hand of the Archon. I think it's a really cool unit. I have built a Hand of the Archon. But, God, the rules are just not that good for it, unfortunately. Just not that good. I do think they could be decent with Lady Malice as a good bodyguard unit. But that's about it. And arguably, you could just put her with Cobalite Warriors. Okay. Let's talk about the Reaper's Wager units, specifically the Quins. So, Reaper's Wager remained unchanged. It is going to be one of the most powerful detachments. I think the top three are going to be Cobalite Cartel, Reaper's Wager, and Spectacle of Spite in that order. But I wouldn't be surprised if people start picking up Spectacle of Spite more and more and more, because it is a very strong detachment that just requires very skilled play. So I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of players started playing more of that as the edition ran on. But Reaper's Wager is going to be incredibly strong going into tournaments and stuff like that as well. So, having said that, what Harlequin units should you include in your Reaper's Wager lists? Well, first of all, let's talk about the Starweaver. So the Starweaver is a pretty good transport for a troop unit. However, having said that, we do have Venoms for Dark Eldar units, which are cheaper. They don't do as much damage and they're not as durable, but they're just cheaper and they get the job done, which is honestly what a lot of Dark Eldar players care about, is being able to deliver the unit, not necessarily the transport. Who cares about the transport? Who cares if it has a 4-up invul save? It's probably going to die anyway. Who cares? Let's just pay less points for it. I want my unit to get out and then get back in and then attack twice, basically, right? The Starweaver is okay. I would say if you're running Reaper's Wager, the Starweaver, getting maybe reroll 1 state and wound isn't that bad, because Harlequins are often going to be losing the wager. I think in Reaper's Wager, it's going to be a situational choice. And we're talking about, something that's good in Reaper's Wager, but not excellent. And I think there's a lot of excellent units already. And Harlequins are going to be kind of shoved a little bit to the side, but not in every case. Okay, so Starweaver, situational, not necessarily needed, but it's good for what it is if you want to run a troop and a Troupe Master and stuff like that. Next up is the Voidweaver. And in my honest opinion, I think the Voidweaver needs buffs, but weirdly enough, I think in Reaper's Wager, it's better than the Hand of the Archon and the Flyer. Call me crazy, but I actually think it's better just because of the fact that it gets to reroll 1 state and wound. And I've had Voidweavers in Reaper's Wager do very well. And I don't mean they did well in the sense that they were reliable, but they stayed alive multiple turns. They stayed alive for 4 out of 5 turns, and they just shot a bunch of stuff off the table. Little infantry units are really good at. I mean, obviously they're not going to be dealing heavy damage to anything, but I ran it with the prismatic cannon and the 2 shuriken cannons. And at 18 inches, I would just keep it just at 24 inches, and it would be hard for my opponent to shoot back at it. So I think taking one of these is okay. However, it is expensive, and I think it does need some buffs in general as a unit, because it's extremely, extremely easy to kill if your opponent just has something to deep strike, right? Literally, if your opponent deep strikes and has a couple of melt-a-guns in the squad, it's dead, right? So, I mean, that is kind of bad for a 125-point unit, but it is what it is. I think it's situational, but it can be used. All right, next up is the troop itself. Now, the troop itself, I'm going to also put in situational. I know, guys, crazy, right? Now, here's why. I honestly think that this was one of the stronger units in the index as far as Reaper's Wager. I think it it did something that the rest of the army could not do in the Index. The Index didn't have good access to dev wounds. So Harlequins being able to go in there, reroll ones to hit, +1 to wound, and then, maybe even reroll ones to wound if you were losing the wager. That was really, really good. To be able to do that, and maybe even multiple times with the Troupe Master and a Starweaver and that whole package, throw grenades, shoot some fusion pistols, excellent. But now, we kind of have the same thing, but better, with Incubi and Drazar and a Venom. It's the same points. 5 Incubi, Drazar, and a Venom are the same points as a Troupe Master troop in a Starweaver. And it's weird because Drazar is just miles better than the Troupe Master. The Troupe Master is good, but he's not as good as Drazar. And his utility, being able to consolidate and pile in 6 and, kind of move over enemy models and stuff, isn't really super useful in that comparison because Drazar now has that too. Drazar can now pile in and consolidate 6 with his unit. And again, you do have the fusion pistols for the troop, but I feel like most of the time, unless something is out in the middle of the battlefield where you can see it, the pistols don't have line of sight all the time, so that's a problem. And Drazar's unit just does much more damage in combat. Like, the combat damage of Drazar and his Incubi are much higher. I know you get more attacks with the Quins, which means that the Quins will be better against lighter infantry, but the vast majority of units that you fight in the game are heavy infantry or higher. So Incubi are just going to be better against a wider array of targets. Incubi are also arguably better against vehicles and stuff with +1 to wound, especially with Reaper's Wager, because you can give them lethal hits. And of course, a Quinn unit is still good. I just think that the, combination of Drazar, 5 Incubi, and a Venom might be better than a Troupe Master troop and a Starweaver. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I personally have had a lot of success with the Troupe Master, Starweaver, and troop in Reaper's Wager, but I think maybe there's better options now. And I think in Reapers, you're going to want to, choose a little bit. Well, you're going to want to go a little bit more heavy into the Dark Eldar stuff now because their data sheets are just that much better, right? Okay. Next up is the Death Jester. Death Jester, awful. Needs buffs. It's not good. Just basically a shuriken cannon, but a little better. Does cause battle shock, which is helpful, but not great. We have a ton of pain token economy anyway. We don't really need that too much. And, essentially at the end of the day, he's just kind of an expensive lone operative that doesn't do a whole lot for you. So I think he needs buffs personally, and that's where I'm going to kind of rest my case on the Death Jester. Obviously, sustained hits 3 can be good if you roll a lot of 6s, but that's just not something to bet your money on. Shadow Seer is up next. Shadow Seer, again, I think the Shadow Seer needs buffs. I think it's actually better than the Death Jester, though, honestly. Shadow Seer, deep striking with the, I want to say Reaper's Cowl is what it's called, but it's basically the one that allows you to, or Webway Portal, something like that, but it allows you to deep strike with the unit, and then you can reroll charge rolls if you're losing the wager. Personally, I don't see the point of this. I know that I've seen Scary use it in a battle report, and he used it to good success. But to be fair, he had the best matchup for the Quins, which was Adeptus Custodes. Quins are really good with their dev wounds and everything at taking those units out. Even in the best of situations, the Quinn unit still died. It traded well, but it still died. And I think in most matchups, they just die. I know they have Lone Op 18, but I think it's more of a flavor unit. and it's not probably more of a actual substance unit, especially when you compare it to some of the stuff you can field in the Codex now, in the Druhkari Codex. So I say, unfortunately, Shadow Seer just not that good. Having hazardous, your opponent take hazardous checks. Again, it's rare that your opponent's going to roll a ton of ones. And again, Lone Op 18 with a combat unit, just not great, in my honest opinion. Okay, next up is the Troupe Master, and we're just going to put him in B tier. We already know he's situational with the other two. Let's move this around a little bit. Boink, right? Honestly, Troupe Master's great. Great character. He just, for 85 points, he can't compete with other Dark Eldar characters. He can't compete with Lilith. He can't compete with Drazar. You know, he's the same cost as an Archon. He's just not as good as those options, right? So when you're choosing characters in your list for Reaper's Wager, there's just better options out there. Next up is Skyweavers. Skyweavers are garbage, but I do think they're better than a lot of these other units here. I'm going to put them right here in needs buffs. I think basically the only buff they really need is to be a little bit cheaper, because 95 points is expensive. And by the way, for the Eldari as well, I think they should be a little cheaper. Harlequin units don't get an army rule when they're with Druhkari. So I know Druhkari, you know, they have the pain abilities and stuff. Well, Harlequins don't really get anything. They just have their data sheet. And I think this is especially bad with this unit, because this means that they can be overwatched, right? You can get overwatched unless you pay a command point in Reaper's Wager to prevent overwatch. They can, you know, move pretty quick, but not as fast as some of the other stuff in the Codex. They have Haywire, but Scourges have Haywire. It's not really needed. It's basically just they have no role, right? There's better melee. There's better shooting. There's better anti-large. There's more durable units. It's just, you do not need these in your army. Skyweavers are just expensive. They're a hybrid unit that does like a little bit of everything, but they're just honestly kind of bad in Dark Eldar, because Dark Eldar units, we can just do it better for cheaper. All right, last is the Solitaire, guys. And I think Solitaire's strong. I'd put him up here somewhere. I think he's probably at the end of strong, because obviously, you know, he can only be used in Reaper's Wager, but he's an additional fights first unit in Reaper's Wager. So, you know, we did lose fights first on the Succubus. The Succubus no longer has fights first, except with an enhancement. So in Reaper's Wager, I think it's a good idea to have 2 fights first units. This means Lilith can be in a transport with witches. She doesn't have to be on foot if she wants to heroically intervene. So honestly, Solitaire, I might even rank him higher, but the problem with the Solitaire is he doesn't really hit that hard. And I think reroll ones to hit is good. Sustained or lethal hits for a CP is good, right? These are things that boost his damage, which he doesn't have in the Eldari Codex, which makes him actually viable. And I would honestly, in Reaper's Wager, I would always take him in Reaper's Wager. He's like, for me, personally, he's an auto-include in Reaper's Wager. Having said that, he's 115 points. He's really, really expensive. And he's only worth it in Reapers because he gets all those other bonuses that he would normally not get in an Eldari list. Now, here's the last kind of part of this here. The Solitaire is a lone op, which is good. We don't have a lot of lone ops in the Druhkari Codex, right? So having a lone op is really useful. But he doesn't have any ability to revive like he does in the Harlequin's detachment, right, in the Eldari. So you have to be very, very careful with them. And in a lot of circumstances, I can honestly see his role being kind of replaced. Not the heroic intervention, like kind of defensive unit part, but the aggressive assassin can almost be replaced by a lonely Succubus. And it's half the cost, right? I'd even say, you know, you could have 2 Succubuses for less points than the Solitaire. And yes, they don't have fights first, but they could kill a character, and they have precision now, base. Lilith has precision now, base, right? The only thing the Solitaire is really giving you is fights first to be able to heroically intervene. And again, arguably in Reaper's Wager, you don't have command points for everything, right? There's going to be something where you're not going to have enough command points for it, and you have to really balance it out really wisely and dole out the command points in an intelligent way. So, yeah, I think the Solitaire is good. I just don't think he's like S tier or anything like that, right? I mean, anyway, that's just my opinion. But I do like him. I do use him in Reaper's Wager because Solitaire is very good for just blitzing across the battlefield, killing something, or, you know, just being a heroic intervention unit. Or being just a lone op who can stand on an objective, I think is really good. Especially since Urian is not here anymore. You know, good old Urian, we can't use him anymore. So having something that can stand on an objective that your opponent can't react to or can't finish off is really strong. All right, and that's the tier list. I think pretty balanced for the most part. It's kind of a shame most of the Harlequin's units kind of changed to lower tiers, and it's honestly just because their competition got so much better that they're not really required as much. So that's a little unfortunate, but fortunately, the Solitaire is still a good option for Reaper's Wager. God, I mean, the top tier looks pretty similar to what it did before, except that Witches are up here. I think Witches were more of like an A tier unit before. Scourges way up here. Helions were more of like an A tier unit. Now they're all the way in S. You include them in every list. Lilith is still the best. I think ironically, I probably had Lilith as the best in the old, you know, tier list. Malice is really good. She got decreased in points. So a lot of this stuff got really strong in the Codex. And I think we're going to have a good time, guys. I think the Druhkari are going to eat well. We are going to feast. We are going to bring home lots of captives to torture and, you know, maim and things like that, or whatever the Dark Eldar do when they're, you know, bored. And we're going to throw a lot of them into the arena and see how they can perform against Lilith and the Witch Cults. So, yeah, it's going to be fun, guys. It's going to be a really, really fun rest of 10th edition for the Dark Eldar. And I cannot wait. I cannot wait to play this even more. All right, guys, that is going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Thanks for staying tuned. A little bit of a long video here with the tier list, but thanks for, you know, kind of hanging in there with me. I'll have this uploaded pretty soon. As of now, I'm recording this on the 30th, so hopefully later today I'll have this up. And yeah, last thing I want to do is thank my patrons and supporters. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you do want to support the channel and become a Patreon member, I do have a free Discord link waiting for you. And you can do this completely for free. You can join my Patreon for free if you want. Of course, I would really appreciate if you wanted to donate, that'd be great. You know, if you wanted to become a paid member. But, you know, if you just want to join the Discord, would love to have you. The link is there for you, and it'll be there on the Patreon. Also, just a quick little thing, because I'm probably sure there was tons of ads in this video. If you are a paid member at any level of my Patreon, you get all, you know, full access to all my videos for, you know, basically for free with the Patreon membership, and it's ad-free. So no ads. So ad-free videos on my Patreon for paid members. Lastly, if you want to get a Druhkari or Eldari shirt on the channel store page, check it out. There's a lot of Eldari designs, and I'm going to get into more Dark Eldar or Druhkari designs pretty soon as well. So check that out if you want. I just recently made a Drazar shirt, Drazar inspired. He's not Drazar, guys. He's not actually Drazar, but he's Drazar inspired. I'm just kidding. He's Drazar, right? I just, you know, he's on there. He's on this channel store page. And if you want to see what I've got on Amazon, you know, I haven't checked it in probably about a month now because Amazon has just been so bad about keeping stock on their Warhammer stuff lately. But there might be some discounted models on Amazon as well. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching once again, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.